Welcome to the BusinessSpeak podcast, where we take everything you need to know about being successful in business and make it easy to understand. Whether you're a longtime business owner, newer to this entrepreneur stuff, or hoping to run your own company in the future, you've come to the right place. Featuring your host, professional accountant and business guru, Mr. Chill. So relax and have some fun with us as we journey through BusinessSpeak, the language of business, simplified.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the BusinessSpeak podcast. I am your host, Mr. Chill. You can call me Corey or Mr. Chill. I'm good with either one. I'm glad that you're joining us here today. And as has been the case with every episode of our podcast, I look forward to hosting and bringing on wonderful people who have a variety of high-tech skills and abilities in areas that I think help almost every business owner to succeed in the different areas of running a business. Today, my guest today, I'm pleased to have on Mr. Damin Massicotte, and I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Corey.
I checked with him before we hit record on how to pronounce his name, and I'm glad I did because I would have got it wrong, either the first name or the last name. So I think I did okay.
You did perfect.
Just now. Maybe people have a cool title they can call you, like Mr. D, or I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know if I go with Mr. D, but yeah.
But yeah, I'm grateful to have Damin on the podcast today. Damin comes to us with a wide variety of skills and backgrounds. Two in particular, he spent a fair bit of his career in the IT industry, and he's kind of developed I don't know if it was a planned or sort of an unexpected turn in his passion towards helping small business owners in the sales side of things, and is making sure that they've got their tools to succeed in the various things that they may not realize are even things. So we're going to dive a lot into that today. Again, Damin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Corey. Glad to be here.
Now, I want to say something I saw was really cool. So when I creeped your LinkedIn profile before we came in to record today, I don't know if it's your own saying or if you just really liked it, so you've kind of adopted it, but you've got these 3 words that are listed at the top of your LinkedIn profile. It says, "Let's do this."
Yes.
Now, I like that for a few reasons. One is because every time when I have someone on the podcast, just before we hit record, I'm always like, okay, let's do this. I don't know if I use those exact words, but I think there's a lot of excitement and implied energy that comes with just that 3 simple phrase, "Let's do this."
Yeah.
So maybe there's no cool story, so maybe make one up if there isn't.
Sure.
But what's the draw, or why does that kind of represent kind of your approach and personality to your business venture, is the "let's do this" mentality?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the "let's do it" mentality, it might have came from, I think it's Nike, where they just do it. And so when I was coming up with a LinkedIn banner for my page, I was thinking, what's something fun that I could just put on there, so when people are creeping me, that they see this very energetic guy that says, "Let's do this," and wants to help people with their business and grow their sales. So when I was putting that together, I was like, I just want to put something fun. So I just decided, let's do this, and I just have left it ever since.
Okay. And so I think you're right. As we already mentioned, it kind of assumes or portrays an excitement and personality that even before people even have met you, you just kind of have this is a guy wants to get like stuff done kind of guy. And so I think that's cool. Now, you have a few different business ventures that you're kind of diving into and in the middle of. As I mentioned, you've been in the IT industry for quite some time. And then your newest venture, Sidecrowd, if I got that correctly.
That's correct.
Kind of works with the average small business owner to help them. Well, maybe I'll let you kind of tell it. How would you describe what you do in your Sidecrowd business?
Yeah, so I've taken traditional sales training before. And during my time throughout my tech career, I've sat through enough sales training and enough sales books and how to sell to realize that there's a bit of a gap in the marketplace for small business owners. And the reason for that gap is most sales trainers out there, they want to work with Fortune 500s. They want to get their one paycheck a year that pays for their lifestyle and let that be that. So the things that they teach small business owners is spend a lot of money in these different areas and you're going to see a guarantee on your investment. Well, for a small business owner that's either just starting or has been in operation for a few years and maybe just looking to start hiring on more salespeople or more sales associates or anything like that, that might not be indicative to their budget. So the thing that I found most helpful is being able to sit down with a small business owner or a business owner in general and just figure out, okay, well, where is some areas that they might be able to redistribute some marketing dollars? And if they can articulate exactly what their business plan is and what their goals are and everything like that, then maybe it's just a discovery meeting as to maybe you don't have enough analytics, and maybe we can start putting those analytics together. So the Fortune 500 companies, they just want to go through their script. They want to get you in and out the door as fast as possible. And a lot of that information doesn't stick because it's not tailored to that business, where I like to do more of the tailoring side so that they understand how it is that I can help them and how they can even help themselves. So that's where my passion came in, was going in and helping the small business owners understand where their money is going, how they can best distribute that money and train their sales team in an effective way that revolves around their business.
So this would be me putting words into your mouth, so feel free to kick back anything that doesn't fit. But it seems to me that what you're doing is harder, but way more rewarding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does that seem right?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. It is a lot more intensive on myself because I'm not just running off a basic script or something that I've created. Obviously, with all sales, there's always going to be a core component, but then there's also that personalization to that business that I need to put together based on that industry, that company, how they talk to their clients and everything like that. So I need to get all that put into the core package so that they understand what it is that they're selling and why, rather than me trying to tell them that you need to sell it this way, because that might not work for them.
Yeah. So customizing the approach and the whole deal to make it work for that particular business owner's size of business, industry, personality, kind of future growth plans and all that stuff. So that's cool.
Absolutely.
What's the story behind the name of your company, Sidecrowd?
Yeah, so Sidecrowd was actually a domain that I'd purchased a long time ago. And when I was in the IT industry, I just thought, hey, if I ever needed a domain, I think Sidecrowd's a very generic name that could pretty much apply to anything. So I'm just going to hold on to this for a while. And I never really thought that it would take off or become a company name that I was ever going to use. But then when I decided to become an entrepreneur, I decided, I should probably have a corporate looking email and that sort of thing. And I figured, I do have that domain Sidecrowd still kicking around. So why don't I turn that into Sidecrowd? And then I even created a bit of a slogan as well, and it's elevating potential side by side, so that it incorporates my company name in there as well, because that's essentially what I'm doing is I'm elevating potential side by side the business owners. So,
okay. So it maybe is a happy accident?
Yeah, happy accident, absolutely.
I can kind of relate to that, actually. That's how it came about with my company name with Chill Group, which was when I was like 13 years old. I realized that my first initial of my last name spelled the word chill. And so I remember I grabbed the email address like chillout@hotmail.com, and I was like, I thought it was so witty and so clever, and I'm like, someday I'm gonna find a way to use that in something. And I had no idea at the time I'd be an accountant or wanting to run my own business. I just thought, how cool is it that my initials can spell the word chill? There's got to be a way to use that somewhere. So kind of like you, when I started my own business, I'm like, I got to find a way to make that work. And initially it was just a play on my name, but now I've been able to incorporate the concept of what chill implies to like the business itself, and it's been kind of a happy accident. So
yeah, it's always good to have those happy accidents, because I don't know what else I would have named my company, honestly.
Now, anything else you want to give us as an intro to who you are as a person? Hobbies, interests, just kind of a little background on yourself outside of your sales and business ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Corey, I know you're a motorcycle guru as well. I think when I actually came here in the summertime, I had taken my motorcycle out and came to meet you at the office and whatnot, and we got talking about motorcycles. So that's obviously something that I have a huge passion in. And the other thing too is I having that tech background is I'm always looking at various different tech pieces. So if that's AI, if it's even just taking apart tech equipment. Recently, I've decided that I was going to start looking at reflashing physical pieces of hardware with basically taking them apart, taking the chips off the board and reflashing it that way. And yeah, it's just it's always just something that I get onto a tangent on. Maybe a YouTube video that comes into my YouTube. Looked at watch repair before, so there's so many different things that I just find so interesting, and then I typically end up trying it out for myself to see if that's something fun to do. But I definitely think from a hobby perspective, the motorcycle is probably the best part. I'll use your reference. It's very chill. So yeah, that's something I like to do. And thankfully, my background in IT has definitely given me that space to explore so many different options and so many different avenues, and especially with the creation of AI, just being able to use that as a sounding board for anything that I'm doing. So
okay,
yeah,
love it. I'm not saying that this will work for you, but speaking of motorcycles, my license plate, actually have two. The license plate on my car is literally Mr. Chill, customized, and the license plate on my motorcycle is as close I could get with the trimmed down real estate they give you to do a license plate, but it theoretically says Mr. Chill with just a little bit less letters, so a little more ambiguity. But
that's awesome.
I was like, maybe there's a way you could get Sidecrowd as some variation on a motorcycle license plate. Yeah. We could go out riding together.
And as an accountant, you probably know you could probably claim that license plate as a expense every year. Is that correct?
I haven't. Actually, never considered that. Okay, note to self after the podcast. Look into that. Now, we're going to spend, I think, a fair bit of our time today talking about the sales side of things. Even before we hit record, just kind of going through some kind of topics we wanted to cover together. You kind of helped open my eyes to see something I've never really seen. And I don't know if it's worthwhile to start here or if this would be in your mind going kind of out of order.
Okay.
But it intrigued me enough that I have to believe that I'm not the only one that would not have thought of this way. So I'm going to start here, and then you kind of direct where you want this to go.
Absolutely.
I was asking you, if a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are just kind of one-person owner-managed businesses, and your focus is on someone having a salesperson or a sales team. I know I work with a lot of business owners who, in their minds at least, think they don't want to grow. They're happy to be a one-person show. Maybe it's fears of managing other people. Maybe it's lack of leadership skills. Maybe it's, I don't want to deal with HR issues. But they kind of they want to go until they can just, their max capacity at their one person, and that's all they want. And maybe I think they're already there. Mm-hmm. So maybe they don't want to grow. Or maybe they do want to grow, but they don't really know how, and they don't feel like they have the time or money to invest in another person. So they're just going to figure out how to do it all themselves.
Of course.
But when I was asking you about that, the thing you said that really kind of changed my perspective was if they have anyone that's working for them, even if it's an administrative person, even if it's someone that answers the phones, you could kind of think of that person as their sales team.
Absolutely.
They may not be called a salesperson on their pay stub or on their job title, but if they're the ones that are front lines interacting with clients, then they are basically as good as, or at least could be considered that person's sales team, whether they realize it or not. And that was a really cool way I'd never really considered before. I mean, in my company, there's 8 of us, and I wouldn't consider I have a salesperson at all. But we've got a marketing guy who probably could very well function that way. Even my receptionist, and just the way that she might answer the phone and the questions that she might ask could technically be considered part of a sales team. So I want to throw that out there because I don't imagine I'm the only one that's never really thought about a salesperson quite that way. And so how would you, where do you want to take that?
Sure. So let me just ask you a question, Corey, because
Please.
that you brought up a really great point about the receptionist or people answering the phone, or even those that are out in the field if you're a tradesperson, for example. Where I just want to ask you this. When was the last time you've had to call a customer support line or anything like that and have been overly frustrated because the person on the other end doesn't understand what it is that you're asking for, maybe doesn't even understand really what the business does?
When you first asked me that, I think of all the fun I have calling the Canada Revenue Agency. I don't really think they care about customer service. At least that's what it would seem. So that's probably not as relevant. I know, not on a business side, but on a personal side, I made a phone call into my phone company, my mobile phone company, to make a change there. And that was just a ridiculous gong show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they weren't necessarily needing to understand my business as much as I just don't think they cared.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm just a tiny little fish for this really big cell phone company and it doesn't matter to them. But those are the two things that come to my mind.
Yeah. Now picture that same person being in your business answering your phones. Is that something that you would want?
No, not at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's maybe a dramatization of sales and how people answering the phone kind of relate back to sales is the person answering the phone is going to be your first line of communication with any customer that you have, right? If they have a question, they're going to call, they're going to hit the receptionist. And I got to give a shout out to receptionists because that's a really hard job sometimes, right? Having to deal with that on a regular basis. But if you get a great receptionist, you're going to remember that experience. You're going to remember that they were able to help you out with all of your concerns. But you're also going to remember those that gave you really poor quality of service, right? And so if you're having those receptionists or those people answering the phone and they're giving a really poor quality of service, and maybe it's not a detriment because that's not, something that they do on a regular basis, but maybe it is a detriment because they weren't trained onto answering some very basic questions, right? Maybe it's, hey, I just need to find your office location, and maybe they don't have that written down, and then it's like, well, I don't know where the office is, right? Like that's that would be a little crazy, but that would give you some negative reputation when it comes to dealing with clients, because then that guy's gonna, or that person's gonna call a different accounting firm, right? I'll use accountants for an example. I'll use your company for an example. So if your receptionist picked up the phone and said, hey, I don't know where the office is, like I'm just, I just work here. Like, what do you want from me? I'm pretty sure that's not going to convert into a client for you.
Probably.
And again, a lot of this is probably dramatization, but it's simple things like, do you even have a receptionist to pick up the phone, right? Like some people use these automated pickups where it's like, hey, give me your voice, or like we'll take you through a voicemail or voice prompts and whatever, and then we'll get back to you in like 12 to 48 hours. And it's like, okay, how is that actually benefiting your business?
Super annoying, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's very annoying. And how many times, like I've ran into that scenario so many times where I'm like, I call a business, I get voicemail, I call another business of the same industry, they pick up the phone, I deal with that company, right? So it's simple things like that when it comes to sales. And so when you're talking about, well, companies don't have salespeople, or maybe the business owner is the salesperson, little tiny tweaks like that make a huge difference when it comes to sales. And so having everybody kind of trained up on why the company is doing what they're doing and how they can effectively help their customers when it is a simple just phone call, it definitely helps. And there's so many opportunities there, just from a simple phone call.
Okay. And I think part of that too, and I don't want to spoil your thunder there, but part of the too to me could also just be in the what I'm trying to say, like the tone of their voice, right? Or the cup is half empty versus cup is half full kind of sound in how they answer the phone.
Absolutely. Me personally, I'd rather deal with somebody very bubbly and upbeat and happy and is happy, generally happy to be there, and they love the company and everything that they do, versus having somebody that's very monotone. They just kind of feel like, you just kind of feel like they're trying to get you off the phone as soon as possible kind of thing, because that generates an experience for me just in those two different contrasting conversations. the very bubbly person is going to be very friendly and easy to deal with, where the monotone person, hey, I do my job, I do my 9 to 5, I go home. You can definitely tell in that conversation what kind of person that's going to be, and that really changes the experience either way.
Thank you. I think maybe one of the reasons I wanted to start with this comment or question is because as soon as I say, okay, today we're going to talk about your sales team, 80% of the people that might be listening be like, oh, I'm just a one-person show. I don't really want to grow, or I don't have a sales team, or I don't want a sales team. What we're going to talk about is not for them. And maybe there's some truth to that. But I think if we can redefine, as you and I kind of talked about before we started, as how do you define what your sales team even is, or who that even is? A lot more people are like, oh, I never realized that my receptionist or my spouse who's doing all my administrative work and answering the phones and responding to emails is kind of being like my salesperson. And maybe there's actually a lot here that I could take away and learn from what we're going to cover today. So that's why I wanted to kind of start there. Mm-hmm. But realizing I may be putting the ox before the horse, so to speak, where do you want to take this? How do you think we should tackle the topics you want to talk about today?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a very systematic approach when it comes to sales. There's so many pieces that have to plug in at a very high level and from a very kind of technical level as well, that there's not ever like a great place to start, if that makes sense. Because I know you were maybe saying you were going to put the horse before or behind the carriage, so to speak, where it's, okay, if you have that, if you're running an operation and you don't have a sales team, or you don't think you have a sales team, well, in most cases you'd likely do. Like tradespeople are a great example of that, right? Where they have, I'll use HVAC and plumbing and that sort of thing as an example here. It's like they might not have a sales team because they don't need a sales team, right? They don't need somebody to pick up the phone and start making a bunch of cold dials and trying to get business, because we all know with the Canadian weather, there's going to be pipes bursting, there's going to be heat out, and there's always going to be HVAC problems in the summer, right? We know that as a fact. So they don't necessarily need to have somebody dialing a bunch of people every day. But what they also need to understand is the people going out into the field, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before the podcast too, is the technicians in the field are your salespeople essentially, because they might be there to fix a burst pipe, but at the same time, they might also notice something in the furnace. So maybe the furnace is of age and is starting to kind of peter out. And if they're out in the winter and they, maybe technicians have this ear for these sort of things where it's like, hey, I can tell by the way your furnace is running that it's probably going to crap out in the next couple of years. Is this something that you would like to replace? Or maybe it's something that you should put on the docket for next year, right? So they become your salespeople, but if they're only focused on fixing that burst pipe, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity there. So that's where I bring that example as you might not need a sales team doing the dials, but you always have some sort of sales team in your business, either that's yourself or your technicians or whoever it is. But relating that back to where do we start? Well, typically that starts when you create your business and you start with your business plan. And there's a lot of information with business plan that relates back into sales. So, Corey, I'm sure you probably created a business plan when you first started.
I'd like to tell you it was a robust, detailed 5 to 10 year plan. Sometimes I think I'd be ashamed to admit that it wasn't anything like that, because I knew I wanted to do something and I was taking a big risk, and I'm like, well, just see what happens. That's never really great approach. Sometimes it's let's just see what happens. But that probably happens more often than I realize, or I think most people would care to really admit, is I rolled the dice and I said, let's take a chance and see what happens. And then if it looks like it's going to turn into something, then I'll start to put a plan together. Again, that's probably the wrong way to do it. That's probably the backwards way to do it. But that probably is a common way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And I run into that all the time, where there's a niche in the marketplace, or there's they have this really great idea that they want to achieve, right? And so the business owner will go out on a limb, start their company, and it takes off, right? And I'm sure you probably saw that when you started yours. It was just exponential growth, like especially in the accounting world, and being a great personality and having that background for yourself. You probably saw it explode. But then the other side of it too is the explosion is great, but then you get to a point where you maybe reach capacity, right?
Your quality would suffer.
Yeah. Your quality might suffer. You maybe are capped at an amount of money that you can generate because it's just you. So then you have to look to hire a team, right? Or you have to hire for another position or anything like that. And then you hire that person on, but then that person doesn't understand anything about your company, anything about your business. They have no direction because you as the business owner, and Corey, you might have been a little bit different, but I've seen this a lot with business owners where they then have to go back and create a business plan so that they understand why they're doing what they're doing so that they can teach that to their new hire, right? And that's that. I think a business plan is a great place to start, again, because it relates to so many different components. It not only relates back to like an HR component, but it also relates back to who do you want to hire, right? Because if you have everything in place, your business plan, your mission, vision, values, you understand who your ideal client profile is, how are you going to talk to them, everything like that. Then when you go to hire, you know what kind of person it is that you're looking for, personality-wise, right? Because the last thing you want to do is hire somebody that doesn't actually meet the criteria that your business has. So if you're, Corey, do you mind if I ask, like, what was your mission, vision, values when you guys opened up? Or maybe do you have a mission, vision, value?
Well, we have a mission statement that is on our email signature that is just finished, like, crafting something I actually liked probably about a year and a half ago. So that only took me 9-10 years to figure that out. I know we have values. I remember crafting them or like writing them down at one point, but I think they're probably a victim of this seemed like something that was good to do. We did it, and then I've never looked at it again. And just sort of in the back of my head, I kind of know what we do, but I don't really reference an official document on it, which is interesting because when I hire people, I'm always like, I don't hire as much on technical skill as I do on fit and culture and values and work ethic. And then I'm thinking to myself, probably should make sure that's actually written down somewhere so I can make sure I'm sending a consistent message to people across the board. Maybe one thing you could help me with then, because sometimes I think I get this confused, so I know there's got to be others that kind of mix this up. Mission statement and I'm forgetting the three that you said. There's mission, values, and vision. I think that's what. So how do you distinguish or help someone understand maybe some key differences if they sound like the same thing between a mission statement and a vision statement?
Yeah. So mission statement, you have to think of what is it that your company is achieving right now. So what is it when you started that you said, okay, my company is going to achieve, for me, for example, my mission is that I want to help small business owners generate additional revenue, right? That's my mission, is I want them to be successful in their sales and helping them understand what it is that they need to do to get there, right? My vision is obviously more long-term thinking. Like future thinking, right? So for me, I like to shake up the sales industry from a sales training perspective where it's not, okay, I got to go find this Fortune 500 guy who's going to teach me how to increase my sales. And I want to be that kind of thought leader when it comes to, well, what are some out-of-the-box ideas that like companies can do in order to grow their sales and understand how to generate more revenue without having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on different products, programs, and services, right? So that's my long-term thinking, is how do I shake up that market space so that I become more of a thought leader in my role, right?
So I want to recap and maybe ask a couple of clarification questions. A mission statement is sort of the present, yes, whereas a vision statement would be in the future.
Yeah, like what's your company trying to achieve in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years? And why is it that you want to get there like that, right? So
would a vision statement tend to be started out or crafted in a we will be or we want to be, or do you, even though it's in the future, you still word it as it is though it's happening now?
Yeah, because
that question makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to think of it as kind of both, right? Is like you got to take your mission into account when you're creating your vision, right? Because if your mission and vision are a little bit out of a line, it's going to confuse not only yourself, but it's also going to confuse your staff, right? So you have to think, okay, my mission right now is to help small business owners, right? Generate additional revenue. But my vision is to also show that there is different ways that you can train salespeople and train business owners that isn't going to cost them an arm and a leg to do so. So that's my long-term vision planning is showing different people in my industry, the sales training industry, that they're more out of the box thinking ideas than there is right now, right? Because there's obviously going to be a bunch of evolution and everything, especially with AI and how that all runs and things like that. So it's kind of thinking, how does this align with my mission and how does this align with my future goals, right?
So would a vision statement be like a constantly changing thing, or is it designed to set a 5-10 year vision statement and then you don't change it for that 5-10 years?
That's typically the way it should run. Is you should try to think long term with it, and so that's why for me it's very long term, right? Is me just getting started as a sales trainer and everything like that. It's okay. I understand that this is going to take some time to kind of shake up that industry, but I'm also going to need to help my customers right now. So I might not need to look at my vision statement for another few years. And that's typically how businesses should run, is when they're creating all of this information. And if it's a single business owner, here's a little bit of a tangent I'm going to go on with mission, vision, values. Is mission, vision, values should all be communicated at a high level between everybody. So if you have management in place and you're trying to create your mission, vision, values, understand from each of your employees' perspective what it is. Like, just do a brainstorming session. Sit down with them and be like, hey, what do you think our mission is? What do you think our vision is? What do you think our values are? Especially from like a shareholder perspective, and even if you're just a single business owner, because these things are going to change over time, of course. But how often you look at that depends on how future planning you are, right? If you're a small business owner just getting started and you're going to be hiring on staff, well, then maybe after you've had a full year or a couple years with those staff members, then maybe you revisit that and see, do my staff see my business differently from today than they did when they signed on? And maybe do we need to look back and figure out if we need to change those mission, vision, values? So when you talk about how often should somebody look at that and how often should that change, it's really dependent on your situation, right? If you're an established business, maybe it's still a good exercise to go through with your staff and say, okay, from a mission perspective, are we still meeting our mission, right? Am I still helping out small business owners achieve greater revenue? If so, great. Hear other people's perspectives and say, okay, maybe we're not aligned. Maybe something fell off and we're not generating we're not generating any additional revenue for small businesses through our sales training. Well, okay, understand why that is, and maybe you need to either tap back into why it is that you started the company, or you need to change your perspective as well. Same thing with your values. Maybe those have changed over time. Maybe you were focused on the wrong things when you started your company, and your staff are starting to see that the values don't necessarily align from when the business started. Same thing with your vision, is when you're just starting out, or if you are an established business and you are reviewing this with your staff and you're saying, okay, the vision is maybe needing to change a little bit because that was just my vision, but now as a whole company, we see it a little bit differently. So coming up with those ideas should be maybe reviewed at different stages of the company life cycle.
And so maybe piggybacking on something you said, I just want to maybe revisit that. If a business has, we'll say, 6 to 8 employees, or 6 to 8 members of their team, counting the owners, would a mission, vision, values approach be effective from, I'll call it top down, where the founders and owners are deciding what they want the company to be, and then they just make sure that's the culture that they're creating? Or is it better if it's a collaborative, let's get everyone in the company involved in helping to craft this? Or maybe there is no one right approach.
Yeah, and maybe I'll use the IT company for an example, because they did this really well when I was working there. Is they realized that their mission, vision, values were maybe different from when they first started the company. And so from a director perspective, they had a director's retreat and decided, okay, here's what we're doing, here's where we want to be, and here's what our vision is for the company. So they sat down, agreed on all of that information. So from that top-down approach, like you mentioned. And then what they also did was when they came back from their retreat, they sat down with the company as a whole and said, here's what we see as our mission. Here's what we see as our values. And their values was a very long list of single word or double word kind of descriptors of the company, right? So like, okay, are we, I'll give you an example. So their values are client focus, reliability, and professionalism. But when they came back from the retreat, they had 3 columns, probably 15 words in each column. And they asked the staff, they said, okay, which of these words resonate the most with us? And so they took that approach as well to say, okay, the staff are seeing it in this capacity, so we must be doing these things as from a value perspective. And then they also had their vision of becoming the Western Canada's go-to MSP provider, right? Paraphrasing, of course, because it is a little bit of a lengthier vision. And so we got everybody's perspective on that, or they got everybody's perspective on that. And we kind of just went through and we're like, yeah, this makes sense for us, like the IT company. And that allowed everybody to be collaborative and put in some input and everything like that. So I think from a top-down approach, it's a great idea for business owners, directors to sit down and just kind of go through and see, okay, what should our mission be? What do you think our values are? And you could just have a whole board full of values, right? And then, okay, here's what we think our vision is. And then take that back to, mid-management, or you could just bring it back to the whole company and say, okay, here's what we think. Does this actually align? Like, are we doing the right checks and balances here to make sure that we're not just off in left field thinking that we're this great company and we have this great culture and everything like that? So then that helped build that culture piece that you were talking about. Is all of those 3 components kind of build that culture piece, and then that gives everybody some input, and everybody has the same buy-in in that point.
That makes sense. So it's kind of both.
Yeah.
Top down and getting that collaborative buy-in from all levels of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take a step back for a second. Sometimes when I've had clients come to me and ask me for help putting together a business plan, it's not because they're particularly wanting to spend the time or energy to put one together. It's because they really want financing, and a bank says, I ain't giving you anything unless you can present to me a business plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the approach is kind of, what's the least amount I can get away with doing and satisfy the bank?
Yeah.
And so I just want to revisit that concept, because it would be very easy to take that, I want to get out of this as minimal time and cost as possible just to get the financing. I don't really that interested in actually creating a useful business plan. For me, I just want to get the bank to give me the funding I want, and then I'm on my way. But the way that you're talking, and I think the way we're going to continue to dive into this concept a little bit, is the business plan is not a what's the least I can get away with so I can achieve a short-term goal. It's, let's pretend I'm building a house, and I'm probably going to want to design the whole house before I put one board on the ground or one nail into the wood. And I'm not going to know what kind of windows I want if I don't know what the house is going to look like. And so many of the decisions I'm going to make later on in building that house are going to be dependent on the blueprints I created from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kind of approach to a business plan is not what's the least I can get away with and move on with my business. It's, this is going to define and make so many other decisions, future decisions of the business, already almost made.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially from a blueprint perspective, right? Because you're not going to try and build a house without a foundation, right? That would be terrible. It's a terrible house to build. I mean, you can do it, of course, but yeah, you're going to have major problems later down on the road. So yeah, it might be great for the first year, but maybe the second year you have so many different issues, right? From a not having that foundation perspective. So I like your analogy of the blueprint, because yeah, you wouldn't just try and slap a house together and hope that it's going to continue to provide you, comfort for the various years to come. So I do like that approach, and I do believe that having that business plan be more than just the bare essentials is going to, I mean, honestly, it's going to save you a ton of time later on in the future too, because now you're not going to have to go back and revisit all these things, especially because you forgot, or maybe you didn't care about having a company culture because you didn't think that you're going to be at a point where you needed to hire staff, or you've hired staff and they don't know what the company culture is. So then you're going back and trying to redefine that. And then you realize, oh, hey, now I have an HR issue because these people are in the wrong seats, or maybe they shouldn't even be at the company at all because they're actually a huge liability for me. So having that foundation in place is going to be huge. And then that also relates back to our other topics that we're probably going to get into is, okay, now that you have that foundation set, how do your clients and how do your potential prospects actually see your company as well? Because it's all good to have that on paper and have your staff trained on that. But if they're misaligned, or they're not actually, if your clients aren't actually seeing that as a portion of your business, well, then they're going to be scared, right? They're going to think, okay, these guys are just phony. They say that they do all these things and they have these values. They're not actually executing anything that they say.
It's just big talk.
Yeah. So aligning all that business plan back into your marketing and into your sales is going to be huge, and it's going to be a huge driver for success.
I don't know if this is possible. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, but if you had to kind of rattle off the things that come to the top of your mind, if you had a solid business plan and all the components that goes into it, but even just the ones we talked about, long-term, mission, vision, values, some of the other stuff we'll talk about shortly, what kind of current and future decisions become so much easier and like almost made for you because you have put the effort into the business plan? Could you just sort of maybe rattle off the ones that come to the top of your head? What's going to be so much easier down the road if you invest the time now in a proper business plan?
Yeah, so kind of that piece that I was saying is when you go to hire, you're going to understand the personality that you're looking to hire, right? You're going to understand if it fits the company culture, and especially from a sales perspective. You're going to be looking at somebody that's going to be a professional salesperson, or maybe it's not even a salesperson, right? Let's go back to that example of the HVAC company, right? You have your mission, vision, values put together. Let's say you want to provide, the greatest HVAC service in the industry in, West Edmonton or in Sherwood Park or something like that, right? And let's say you go to hire for a technician and they don't have the credentials that they don't have the credentials that you want, right? And maybe they don't have the HVAC credentials, or maybe they don't have, or maybe they do have the HVAC credentials, right? But the personality doesn't actually fit what your values are, because maybe your values are, hey, I want somebody who's going to be professional, it's going to be polite, and client focused, right? Let's just use client focused again as an example. And when you're interviewing them, maybe they've, provided some terrible insight into their personality, right? Maybe they're the most impolite person that you've ever met, or maybe they don't care about clients. They just worry about what their paycheck is going to be, right? Well, then you're going to be able to filter those out rather than hiring that technician based on credentials, right? So going back to that whole credential thing is maybe they have the credentials, but they don't have the personality. But if you don't have those values in place, so when you go to hire, you're going to hire that guy and you're going to find out, oh, hey, they're actually costing the company money because every time we send them out to the job, they're swearing, they're being impolite, they're, they don't give a crap about the client. They just are there to collect their paycheck and come home. And then that client never calls back because they had a terrible experience. So there's two facets of that. Is A, you're not generating any additional revenue from that technician that you've hired. And then B, so you're not generating any additional revenue from that person, that technician. And then you also have to figure out how to now possibly get rid of them, which is going to be an additional cost for you because maybe they've been in the role for more than a few months. So maybe you got to be looking at severance and And all of those extra HR things that you didn't want to have to even look at is now something that you're going to have to look at. So it's going to save you time, it's going to save you money if you have that all in place, because if you go to hire that person, you already know what culture that you're looking to breed in your company, and be able to see if that person has that personality to easily come on board, right?
And so I want to dive into one other aspect of this you alluded to earlier, but we just spent some time talking about how it would help you in who you hire. Mm-hmm. It ideally would also guide you in what kind of clients that you take on. And maybe that's a weird concept for some people, because maybe people sometimes feel like, I got bills to pay and I got a mouth to feed, and anyone that says they want to be my client, I'll take them. Mm-hmm. But in reality, that's probably not a best strategy. It might seem really good short term, but you really want to be kind of picky. You mm-hmm. want clients that would align with your mission, vision, values as well. It's not just the employee side of things. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's absolutely correct. It also gives you the ability, once you have that business plan and everything in place, to be able to say no to those type of clients. Because now, once you have your business plan, you can build your ideal client profile. So who is it that you're trying to target and why? Because you'll understand some people are going to fit into your business plan very well. So you're going to be, if you're HVAC company and you're going for client focus and, polite and, easy to deal with and that sort of thing, whatever your values are, you'll be able to plug that into your ideal client profile and be like, I want to work with these sort of people that understand my business, are polite, understand that we have a client focus, and not go after somebody that doesn't give a crap about us. They don't care if we're client focused, if we're polite. They just want their job done, because they're likely just calling you and saying, hey, I have this pipe burst, come fix it. And sure, you could go do that because you got mouths to feed, but what value are they actually bringing back to you, right? Are they going to tell their friends that you came and saved their butts when their pipes burst? Or are they just going to be like, oh yeah, I dealt with this guy or dealt with this company and that's it, right? They're not going to give any sort of glowing review or anything like that. They're just going to be that person that, sure, I went and did this job just because I wanted mouths to feed. But when you have your business plan, you can kind of tap into those people that you know are going to provide great value for you. They're going to give you those Google reviews. They're going to give you referrals and all of that, where that's a critical component that you miss if you don't have that business plan in place. So going back to the ideal client profile, then you can also take your messaging and market it to those people that you want to do business with, and allow you to say no to those people that you don't want to do business with.
So how do you decide, if you're a business owner, when your role is helping coach and help business owners, if someone asks them, well, who's your ideal client? And they'll be like, anyone that wants my services. How do you get into a different way to think about who your ideal client is, more than just anyone that wants to buy from me?
Yeah, so that's usually a huge discovery for them as well, is because they think that they want to deal with anybody, and there's so many components that we could look at when it comes to who do you want to do business with, and the biggest thing is understanding from their perspective, who are they currently doing business with, right? Did their messaging or did their ideal client profile that they put together, or maybe they didn't even put a client profile together. And then it's going back and understanding the basics. Maybe they don't even have the business plan. So that's why I say everything is so interrelated, because if they don't have a business plan, they probably don't understand who their ideal client profile is. They don't understand what their messaging needs to be. And then they have that approach where anybody and everybody is going to be my client, but then they're never understanding as to why things are working from a marketing perspective, why they aren't, and who's converting and who's not converting, and where they're just kind of running wild and free without any actual data to say, no, your ideal client profile should probably be accountants, or maybe your ideal client profile should be lawyers or anything like that. So when I hear everybody say, or not everybody, but business owners who have that approach where it's like, I'll just deal with anybody, I take a minute and I say, well, they probably have people that they're dealing with right now and they don't even realize are their ideal client profile. So then it's usually a conversation that needs to be had of, okay, well, like, who have you actually worked with right now? Because maybe they have all that information in place, that ideal client profile, and they have their messaging, but maybe they have advertising dollars going to the wrong place, right? Let's say they have everything in place, but their clients that are converting are actually not in their ideal client profile anymore. They completely different ideal client profile than what they ever thought they would be in. And they're not actually keeping track of any of that information because they're just looking at, hey, look, I'm making some money. I don't care who it is. I'm just just here to make some money. But then when you actually go back and look at it and be like, okay, well, your ideal client profile, you said, are people in manufacturing, but you're getting accountants. So that's two completely different industries. What is going on here? And then you take a kind of a microscope to it and you say, okay, well, you have the business plan in place, you have your mission, vision, values. Clearly that's resonating more with accountants than manufacturing. So how do you then retarget manufacturing if that's really the industry that you're trying to go for? Because your messaging isn't talking to manufacturing anymore, it's now talking to accountants, and taking that approach and shifting the message to that other profile that you might need to revamp. Or maybe it's something to do with you spending advertising dollars on like Google ads, but maybe the Google ads are targeting accountants specifically for some reason. Well, understanding how those ads are performing is going to give you an indication as to, hey, yeah, apparently my ads are doing well for accountants, so maybe I need to change the messaging on the ads and maybe bring it back more to manufacturing and see if that little change is enough to bring back my ideal client profile. Or maybe I need to add accountants to my ideal client profile.
Yeah.
So there's so many different areas, but again, having that blueprint in place helps you understand what's working, what's not working.
Well, and you've defined like an ideal client in terms of like what industry they're in. I want this kind of client as far as I want them to manufacture, not accounting or whatever. There probably is multiple ways that you could segment or describe your ideal client. I know for me, sometimes people are like, well, Corey, if I were to refer an accounting client to you, what industry would you want them in? And my answer is very much not industry specific. It's more like the mindset or I won't say personality, but the kind of the mindset of the owner. I don't care what industry they're in, but I want to work with an owner who exhibits these type of qualities. So maybe it's more of a value alignment than an industry alignment.
Absolutely.
But I'm guessing an ideal client profile would address all of those aspects.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely does help when it comes to defining who it is that you want to work with, for sure. But Corey, let me ask you this. So with the accounting firm, who is, like, have you gone through the exercise of figuring out who the ideal client profile is, or even some attributes of people that you like to work with?
Yeah, usually when people ask me that question or when it comes up, I'll usually say my favorite type of client to work with is one who wants to grow and one who wants to learn.
Okay.
That's why I'm trying to think about this in a slightly different way, because if someone said, well, do you want to work with someone in retail? Do you want to work with someone in the oil industry? Do you want to work with someone in and for me, it's not industry specific. It's the type of person that I'm working with. Mm-hmm. And so I know for us too, like we'll do complimentary consultations, and I think the clients or potential clients come in thinking, well, this is a chance for me to get all my questions answered for free. No problem. They can look at it that way. I look at it as that this is an interview from my perspective to see if this client is a good fit for us. Mm-hmm. And it's not because of the industry they're in as much as, when I find that I want to get wrapped up in helping people. And so is this the kind of client that's going to be open to help? Is this the kind of client that's going to be able to take suggestions and implement them, or at least consider them instead of just dismissing them? Is this a client that's going to appreciate the quality of what we try to produce and not just, care about the dollars and cents pricing at the end of the day? Mm-hmm. So those are the things I'm looking for in these consultations that maybe the client doesn't realize. But for me, that's kind of scoping out my ideal client and seeing if they're a good fit in those other ways.
Okay, absolutely. So let me dive a little bit deeper into that too, and
Please.
I hope this is okay. So what brought you to the idea of I want to work with people that are willing to grow and are willing to learn? What was the deciding factor to those two key pieces of people that you want to work with?
I think for me, it's because that's where the rewarding side comes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm an accountant, so stereotypically I should, love nerdy things and staring at spreadsheets and playing with numbers and, data entry and stuff, those are okay. I think I'm pretty good at it, but they don't get me like pumped up to come to work. Man, I can't wait to look at 12 more spreadsheets today, or I can't wait to crunch 35 more tax returns. Like that doesn't get me excited. Mm-hmm. But when I get to sit in a room with someone and see those kind of light bulb moments come on and help them, okay, well, you had a decent year this year, but let's talk about how this next year could be even better. Mm-hmm. Let's do some strategy. That's what gets me excited when I come to work and I have 5 client meetings that are all kind of strategy and how to help that client achieve their own goals and dreams and how I can play a role in that. That's what I love. Mm-hmm. And so if you ask me why is that kind of who I look for, it's because that's what gets me excited. Mm-hmm. And I figure if I want a client who wants to, tap into something that I'm super passionate about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to jump to an assumption here, and you can tell me this is correct, but I assume that your staff also feel that same rewarding factor when they're dealing with those kind of clients as well. Is that correct?
I hope so. Not all the employees, but not all the team we have interacts directly with the clients, but we try to have this culture in our business that is one where people love to be. I mean, you've seen our office, mm-hmm. and you might walk in and initially think, where the heck am I? I thought I was coming to visit an accounting firm, and it looks like a Lego museum. But it's the whole concept of, when I started the business, I wanted to provide something that was about the experience. Mm-hmm. And I not only want to provide that experience for the client, I also want to provide that experience for the employee.
Yeah.
And so I hope, it's my goal, that they feel that they're a right fit as well. But it's not necessarily because they all directly interact with clients, but I think a lot of them see the bigger picture, and they're able to kind of realize the important role they play even indirectly in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now picture not having any of that idea in place, right? Like I'm going to relate this back to having that business plan, right? Is if you wouldn't have had that, you might not have had the same employees that you have today, and it might not 100%. Have been the same ideal client profile that you're looking for, or even the personality types that you're looking for when you're dealing with that business, right? And so that's why when I talk about having all these in place, that's that key component, is understanding who it is that you want to do business with. And then obviously you guys have a consultation, so you can wean out those ones that you might not want to do business with, or maybe, and I'm sure you probably don't just say, hey, no, we're not going to do business with you. You probably refer them over to another accountant that's yep. maybe looking for that particular style of client, right? And so when you have all those pieces done well, and I think your company is doing that very well, because I know when I was doing the IT, I actually, it's funny because you were a client of the IT company, yeah. And I came into your office and I saw the Lego, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting, right? And then when I got to know you a little bit more, I'm like, this is his personality. This is who Corey is. This is who Mr. Chill is, right? Like that's who you are. And I could tell even with your staff and your employees, it's like they all have that sense and that culture. And then when I came in to talk to you about just doing my books and things like that, and the accounting side of things too, again, I felt that warm, inviting feeling that I know you guys are trying to bring, right? So you are a great example of somebody who's had that experience and been able to go through all of that and be able to decide who your ideal client profile is and the right messaging and everything that there is to do. And I think this is a great example of somebody who's doing it well. And I think that's why it's very important to have all those pieces in place, right? Because then you can take to your messaging and say, these are the people that I want. And that's going to give you better conversion on all of that.
I really appreciate that. And I guess I'll give you that $10 after the podcast for putting that plug in.
10? No,
I'm sorry.
No.
Anyways, no, thank you. That's very kind. I want to dive into something that kind of came out of that conversation that maybe some people are wondering. If someone is starting out or living the proverbial paycheck to paycheck, mm-hmm. they may not feel like they can afford to say no to a potential client, even if they have the business plan and the mission, vision, values, and even if it's very clear that client is not a good fit, they're not going to be the right client, they're not going to be a good experience for either side of that, I don't have the luxury of saying no. I can tell you firsthand that it was super empowering when I felt like I was at a place where I could actually say no to someone who wanted to use our services. It felt weird at first, but it was empowering. But how do you help someone? What do you say to someone who feels like their cash flow is so tight that even though they know it's not a good fit, they feel pressure to say, sure, I'll work with you anyway?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, actually, because that is a common concern. Is I want to make bank because I need to be able to pay my bills, feed my family, everything like that. And the power of saying no is actually is greater than they realize, because let's say they do take the job, and regardless of whatever that job is, if that's not their ideal client profile, the customer is going to understand that there's a cultural misalignment with the business and with themselves. And so that's going to put a little bit of hostility out in the air already. But then the other thing too is if it's not your ideal client profile and it's not aligning well with your company and you're just doing it because you know you need to make that money, that customers, like I say, the customer's going to feel it, and it's very likely that something is going to go awry, or the customer is going to notice something regardless if it's related to your service or not, and cause problems, right? They're going to say, oh, this person did a terrible job, and that's going to give you some negative connotation in your business and in your industry. And that's maybe some negativity that you want to try and avoid, because you're obviously trying to feed your family, and you want to have as many referrals as possible. You don't want to have negative referrals, right? So by saying no, that empowers you to be able to say, hey, you know what? I don't feel like I'm a good fit for you, but I know there's other companies out there, and it's always good to have a Rolodex of people that you can refer the business to, rather than saying, no, I'm good, thank you. Because then that person's going to feel like they've been taken care of, and they understand that, hey, they're not a good fit for me, and I'm not a good fit for them, but they were able to help me figure and solve my problem through a different company. So I'm going to give them kudos to understanding that, hey, me as a customer was not a good fit. I really respected that, and I'm glad that they got me set up with this other company, because not only does the other company get a good rap, you also get a good rap as well, because they understand that it would have maybe not have been a great fit either way.
Leaves a positive taste in their mouth.
Absolutely.
Even if they're not going to be a client, they might still think favorably of you, which could do good things down the road as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah, and I mean, you might have experienced that too in your understanding of what you want as a customer as well. Is, hey, I know that this is probably not going to be a good fit, and if I take this on, sure, I'll be able to do an okay job, but that customer is maybe going to feel like they're needing more, they're wanting more, and it might not be a great fit for them. And if I give them that, then it's just going to be maybe a stalemate, or maybe they're not going to provide me any additional value, and I'm not going to provide them any additional value. Where I know where this other company who specializes in whatever it is that they're looking for can give them that additional value, and then they're going to feel like they've been taken care of from both sides, right?
Yeah. Well, and you kind of brought up another point that I think it's worth at least spending a moment on. When I first started, I used to feel like, okay, well, I'm an accountant, so I have to know everything. And I'd go to my professional development conferences, these tax conferences, and they would talk about so many things. I'm like, this made so much sense. This, I don't understand anything they said. And I'm feeling stupid because they're talking about it. So clearly I must need to know it, but I don't know how to do any of this. And so sometimes a client would come along and be like, well, I'm an accountant and I do taxes. So theoretically I should know how to do every type of tax and every kind of accounting situation. And it drove me crazy, feeling like I had to be the answer for everyone, until I realized that I didn't.
Yeah.
And that there was actually nothing wrong, in fact, probably healthy for me to recognize where I have strengths, but where I also don't have strengths, or where maybe I'm not as passionate about. And as you said, developing a Rolodex of, okay, this is an issue, or this is a need that technically I could do. I could fumble my way through it and probably figure it out. But if I'm transparent enough to tell you I could do it, but I'm probably not the best option for this.
Yeah.
But here's a trusted colleague of mine who I know is exactly who you need. As you said, it does multiple things at the same time, but it, in a weird way, it inspires more confidence in that potential client in you when you recognize your limitations and provide an alternative option that's going to be even better.
Absolutely.
It sounds weird, but it almost does more for you than if you took that client on and fumbled your way through it.
Yeah, because then they're going to feel like they've been taken care of fully, right? Regardless if the other company does a good job or maybe just a mediocre job, they know that you were strong enough to say, hey, I don't understand this fully, or I don't think I can provide as well of a service, so I'm going to refer you out. And like I say, regardless if this other company that you referred them to does a mediocre job, poor job, whatever, right? Because that's not necessarily on you now. It's you saying, hey, you know what, I'm not a great fit. I know these guys. Let's deal with them. Obviously, if you have a Rolodex, you should probably make sure they're vetted before you start referring clients over to them. But I mean, things happen, right? Accidents happen and whatnot. But at least they feel like they've been taken care of, right? And they're not back out on the search, because that's the biggest thing with referrals. Because not only is that going to work for you, it's also going to work for them. Because if you're referring clients to them, here's another source of income for you. Is they can now refer clients over to you that they don't think are going to be a good fit for them, but they know they would be a great fit for you. So now you have that exchange of referrals, and you have that open line of communication. So there's also another stream that you could tap into there, which is also great.
Now, Damin, we've talked a little bit about the business plan. We talked about the mission, vision, values. You talked about finding your ideal client profile and defining that. What's kind of another key piece of the sales process that you work on a client with? What's next, or what's another area we can dive into?
Yeah, I kind of touched a little bit throughout this process here is understanding that data that you might not fully have under wraps. So most business owners that I run into usually don't track a lot of the key information that they should, such as where their marketing dollars are going. So again, going back to that whole idea of, hey, my ads are doing really well with accountants, but that's not actually my ideal client profile. So what is happening here, and why? Why am I targeting accountants so much when I'm really supposed to be targeting manufacturing? So then it's taking a look back and saying, okay, well, obviously I've generated some revenue from the accountants, but I'm spending Google dollars, or I'm spending my dollars on Google ads that aren't performing for manufacturing. So do I need to pull back from my Google ads? Do I need to change my messaging? Or maybe you're doing Google ads and you don't even realize that none of that money is converting into an actual client. This is always a good example as well, is, okay, you're running Google ads and maybe you have it targeted to a geographic region. So let's use Edmonton for an example, right? Maybe you're a massage therapist and you're running Google advertisements around Edmonton, and you're located, let's say, on the West End, right? So you have a lot of West End clients coming in because that's where primary portion of your clients are coming from. But your Google ads are also targeting the north side, the south side, and Sherwood Park. And maybe your Sherwood Park location or your Sherwood Park referrals are increasing quite rapidly. And now you got to take a look, am I getting that referral from a client? Am I getting that referral from the Google advertisement? Am I getting that referral because I recently did a speech over in that area? Understanding where all those referrals are coming from is going to be a great indication as to what's working and what's not working. But you need to be able to track that, right? So for a massage therapy office, is you want to look at when your customers are coming in or filling out online forms, having that "where did you hear about us" is going to be a great indication as to what's working, what's not, right? So when I talk about those Google ads, for example, so if you have that on your website or you have that on your intake form and they fill it out and it is coming from your Google advertisements, great. Then you understand that you're getting some ROI from your Google advertisements in Sherwood Park. But how about the West End? Or how about the South Side? Maybe you've got nothing from the South Side from your Google advertisements. Well, then why are you paying to have your Google advertisements on the South Side, right? So maybe you can pull back those dollars and put it towards the marketing for Sherwood Park or the South Side, or maybe you need to retarget how your messaging is on those Google advertisements in those areas. Or maybe you're just getting a ton of referral business, right? Maybe you have all of your clients talking about you. Maybe this one person knows 100 people, and that's where all of your all your business has been coming from. And it's like, okay, well, do I need to run Google advertisements for this month, or am I packed full with referral-based network or referral-based business, right? So then taking those marketing dollars and either keeping it in the business or redistributing it to other key areas. Maybe it's hiring another massage therapist. So it's taking a look at all of those components when it comes to that and saying, okay, this is what's working, this is what's not working. And same thing can go with your sales team, for example. Like if you have a sales team, who's your lead for your sales? Like each month, who is outperforming everybody else? And who's the ones that are struggling? And maybe having a conversation or pulling the team together and pairing them, having a buddy system might be beneficial, because then you compare the ones that are performing least with the ones that are the best performers and figuring out how is that relationship going to work so that the least performer can kind of pick up on some techniques of the best performer, right? But if you don't have any of that data to say, oh, Joe is not performing very well, but Adam is doing very well, you're never going to understand why Joe is always feeling under the weather or doesn't want to come into work or anything like that, because maybe his morale has dropped, or maybe his self-esteem and his sales ability has dropped, but you don't have that information. So then you think, oh, I just need to cut Joe out of the company because he's not performing very well. So it's having very basic information like that is going to definitely help increase revenue, because maybe if Joe is feeling under the weather over the last couple months and maybe something big has happened and you haven't done any check-ins with him, then maybe that's been an indication as to why his sales aren't up. And maybe you didn't realize that because you weren't tracking that sale and you weren't able to provide him that support that he needs to get back on track. So instead, some companies might just cut Joe out and hire another person.
And make the same mistake.
But make the same mistake. And it's a more costly mistake, where if they would have just paired Joe with the best performer or had that check-in with Joe, then maybe it would have been a very easy uptick back into his sales.
What is the best way from your experience, or maybe let me ask the question differently. What software would be a good way to aggregate and analyze the data that a business owner or business is collecting in these various metrics?
Yeah, I mean, there's some very great software. And like I say, coming from that Fortune 500 sales training background where I was trained with all those Fortune 500 trainers, it's a realization that these trainers usually get some sort of cutbacks or like a distribution of funds if they recommend a company. And so they usually recommend like a CRM company like HubSpot or Salesforce or any of these large CRM companies. And the CRM is customer relationship management. And it's just a system where you can track a lot of this information and pull reports and everything like that. So if I'm talking with a small business owner and I understand that there's not a ton of funds to go around, the easiest and most basic thing you can do is start tracking it on an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets, or because Google Sheets is free from my experience, yeah. Right? So you don't even have to pay for Microsoft Excel, right? If you're just looking to get very basic information and just get started on doing some of this information, Excel sheet or worksheet is perfect, because you can capture basic information like first name, last name. Well, let me back up here and say, depending on the type of industry that you're in, maybe your business to consumer relationship or your business to business relationship, there's two different types of information you should be capturing, right? So for a massage therapist, for example, very consumer-based business, right? So they're probably going to want to capture their first name, last name, age, their location, so demographic, like region and geographic, Then how did you hear about us? Maybe their birthday. And birthday is a really great example because if you're a consumer-based business, maybe you can offer special deals for those who have birthdays coming up or anything like that. So then that drives that additional revenue from a return client perspective because now you've offered them something. So just capturing basic information like that, then taking that information and parsing that over, because Excel is a great tool, and I'm sure as an accountant you probably understand.
It has its limitations, though.
It does have its limitations, but being able to analyze that data and just doing a simple filter, right? If you have that information of where did you come from today, or where did you hear about us? Being able to filter by advertisement, word of mouth, Google, that sort of thing. You just do a quick filter and then scan your columns and figure out how many of those were actually from Google advertisement or how many of those were actually from word of mouth. Then you can say, okay, I'm getting nothing from Google advertisements over the last month. Do I even bother doing it next month? Or maybe I need to figure out how to re-message that advertisement so it goes to the right people. Or maybe you're targeting the wrong people altogether. Maybe you're trying to go for a demographic of people in their 40s to 50s, but the clients that you've been getting are in their early 20s and 30s, right? But your advertising is going out to those that are 30 and 40 and completely missing part of that business that you've actually already been getting of the 20 and 30-year-olds, right?
So for that data collection process, and maybe it just varies, but is it more effective to have like a receptionist to like ask those questions when somebody like shows up, or just they follow up a phone call, or is it more effective to like do like a Google form and then invite either with an incentive or not for customers to fill out like a survey type thing, or like what do you find is most effective?
Yeah, I say for the consumer-based industries like massage therapists, anything relating to like health and wellness, having online forms are great because most people who are looking for a chiropractor or massage therapist or physiotherapist, they want to have easy access to filling out information and getting booked in. They don't necessarily want to call and go through all that information with somebody on the phone. So having that form on a website is going to be very beneficial, and it's just a simple toggle on the website as to how you heard about us. And then all of that information, especially if you have a CRM system in place, we'll capture that information and put it directly into your CRM. And then when you run your reports from your CRM, it will tell you where all these people came from. Whereas if you're doing it more of a manual method with the Microsoft Excel and things like that, then it's definitely one of those things where you want to try and capture that data as that person's coming in, or if you have them on the phone. So let's say you're a tradesperson, right? And you're a plumber or HVAC, and you're on the phone taking an emergency call. Yeah, you want to be quite brief and quick and grab some basic information. But having that quick information being, hey, like, just curious, I know you're in a bit of a jam here, but like, how did you know to call us, right? And then having that information captured and put onto a Google Sheet or anything that's easily accessible, that could be done, like I say, like you said, through the receptionist if they have one, through themselves later after the call. But being diligent enough to know that a manual process, you have to show up to it every day and enter in that information, because the information is only as good as the amount that you're putting in, because that's going to result in what you get out of it, right? So it's usually more beneficial to have a CRM that can capture that automatically and can integrate into your website so that you can just quickly run reports out of it and be able to pull all those stats without having to spend a lot of that manual time. But I definitely think for a company that is struggling to pay their bills and understand where the marketing dollars are going, rather than investing into another program, just taking that extra time, maybe in the evenings or something like that, and just digesting all that information that they captured during the day and putting that into a Google Sheet might actually help them understand where all their money is going.
You remind me of another question I wanted to ask in this kind of concept. What role, and maybe it's constantly changing, but what role does social media play in driving business and sales? And I guess maybe it's a two-faceted question, but like, for example, a few years ago, people would have told me, and they did tell me, Google's a waste of time. People don't Google things anymore. They're just going based on what they, a friend recommends. And I was like, hey, who do you recommend on, they'll post on Facebook, who do you recommend that does this? And they'll get their friends or community members to recommend, and they do that. They don't Google anymore. And so, and then it's like, well, we don't want to spend money on advertising on social media, so we're just going to try and do organic. We're going to post every 4 or 5 days and just hope to build a following, and then we get clients that way. So I don't even know exactly what one question I'm trying to ask, but in your experience and looking ahead, what role do you think social media plays in this versus traditional advertising?
Yeah, and that's a good question too, because I do hear this a lot, and it depends. The answer is that it depends on what social media you're utilizing, what industry you're in, and what's the best way to reach your clients, right? And I'll give you an example here. People always say Google reviews are the best for figuring out if you should do business with a company, and I'm gonna challenge that a little bit and say, through personal experience, I had gone and needed some repairs. I actually needed to replace the skylight altogether in my house. And my wife, being lovely as she is, went through the due diligence to find 3 companies on Google that had good Google reviews to give estimates on our skylight replacement. Only one company got back to us within like a short time frame. Most of these companies got back to us in like a week, which is also not acceptable in my opinion. But the one company got back to us, they came out, gave us our estimate, and we ended up going with them. We didn't know that that company sold to a different owner during the summer. So when we were doing our research and everything, it was under an old owner. Then when we wanted to get our skylight replaced, it was under the new ownership. And keep in mind, they had glowing 5-star reviews. We got our skylight replaced, and come this winter, we had nothing but problems. We had total condensation issues. We ended up having to put a dish mat on our floor because it would condensate so bad. And this, keep in mind, this was in very mild weather, like -1, -2. And this, we just have a rainfall basically happen on our floor. And we ended up going back and forth with this company for many months. We got to a point where I was going to have to either take them through small claims to try and recoup our money, because now we needed to go with, and we basically had to replace the skylight again. And so when you talk about that word of mouth referral and how does that work, I actually had a home inspector recommend a company based on something that happened to his place a few years ago. And so I was like, hey, you're a home inspector, you've looked at this, you've noticed that this is a problem, who do you recommend? Because I don't want to go through this whole process of being burned again by Google reviews. So we had this other company come out, did a fantastic job, replaced it, fixed everything that needed to be fixed. And then thankfully we were able to work with the old company to get our refund and everything and whatnot. But it goes to show that Google reviews don't always mean that they're the most reputable, and they don't actually show what happens on the back end. We didn't know that the owner sold that summer, so we didn't know it was under new ownership, and we were trusting based on what people were saying with the old owners. And so we ended up finding out through a mutual friend of the old owner saying that he said sold the business. So what social media works, obviously Google reviews do help with bumping you up from a search engine optimization perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best or that people can actually trust those Google reviews, right? I'm going to be a lot more weary of Google reviews now, but the best thing that I've actually had advice on is under the Google page, there's actually like postings that you can post, like almost like a social post. And what you can do is you can post to there showing that your business is obviously active and engaging with people. I don't know if you knew that, Corey. But yeah, there is a spot. If right underneath the Google reviews, there's actually like postings. and it's all like you can post social media posts and stuff to it. So that helps show that the business is active and is actually engaging with the community and whatnot. So having great information in the Google posting there definitely helps, because then it shows that it's an active business, and that's going to be something I look for moving forward. But then also understanding what industry you're in and how that could possibly relate to other social medias. So a good example would be massage therapists might do really well on Facebook because they can tap into Facebook groups, for example. So they might be able to get into a group of, I'll use this example because I've heard it so many times now, of like middle-aged mothers, right? They have like a middle-aged mothers group on Facebook. And so maybe a massage therapist can tap into that group and become the word of mouth massage therapist because somebody is referring them in that group. So let's say a mom goes out, gets a massage by this massage therapist. She goes back onto the group. Next time somebody's looking for a referral to a massage therapist, she's going to probably drop your name in there as that massage therapist. And then all of a sudden you get that whole trust of that entire group as now you're the best massage therapist in town, right? So that might work for a massage therapist, but somebody selling like B2B services, for example, might want to utilize something like LinkedIn, right? It's more of a professional network where you're usually only connecting with people that you know or people that you trust. And you can use that as more of a insight into what's going on with your business and like how your services are benefiting other people and that sort of thing. I think, Corey, you probably use LinkedIn.
I'm on it, but I, in a full disclosure, don't use it at all.
Okay, then there we go. So maybe that might not work for you based on your business, right? Because maybe you have enough influx of business coming in where you don't need to spend a lot of time with social media. Because that's another thing, is you can spend a ton of time on social media and maybe not get anything. And that's where I go back to having those analytics in place where it's like, okay, how many hours a day am I spending trying to get business from social media, or how much of that is actually converting from social media? But it's also just understanding there's so many components to it, and this is why I definitely recommend like marketing companies, for example, because they understand the analytics and the algorithms of the different social media platforms based on what works on your industry. What seems to be most beneficial, if people can get over the fear of being on camera, is being able to post quick, 15 to 30 second updates about what's going on with them, what's going on with their business, and some feedback as to what's going on in the industries or anything like that. And then with their social post, providing some valuable information that isn't just targeted to, hey, I do accounting, right? It's, hey, did you know the CRA is having this on this day for, whatever it is, right? Having some insight that you can provide to those people definitely helps. So long tangent about social media. And the answer is it all depends on industry, target customer, where they're hanging out, everything like that. But again, going back to that whole business plan, understanding your ideal client profile, you might understand better where they're hanging out, and then you can retarget to those social medias where they're hanging out.
Okay. Thank you for diving into that. I feel like we could spend hours talking about so many aspects of what you do and Absolutely. Why it would benefit a business owner. If we could just pick one other kind of key thing that maybe is like, if I get nothing else across today, I want to dive into this one last topic, one last area of the sales process or business plan stuff that you work with clients on. What would you say would be kind of in your mind the most pertinent, the most important to share and talk about?
Sure. I'd like to touch on AI and how AI is kind of creating a non-unique situation, if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, it's actually good you say that, because I was like, I have an interesting question that may give a really a way into talking about the AI, but it probably was not in the way that I was initially thinking. So I'll ask my question and then let's use it as a segue into AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hearing statistics lately. I think I just read an article yesterday in CTV News or something that was saying that they're finding a large amount, I think it was upwards of 30% of people that used to Google everything are now ChatGPTing everything. Mm-hmm. And so where you might be able to use Google advertising to help drive business if people aren't Googling anymore because they're ChatGPTing or using other AIs to find information, answers, and sources. how does that affect a business's ability to use their advertising dollars or influence people either way? So that was the question I was going to ask you, is how does AI throw a possible wrinkle into the traditional method that's been there for advertising on Google and whatnot, and then using that as a segue into just AI in any aspect you want to talk about?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's quite interesting because there's so much mystery around how AI searching and everything actually works and that sort of thing. And I'll say for myself, I definitely use AI, like ChatGPT, for almost every search now.
I know, me too.
Because it is so efficient at pulling out the key informations that you're asking it, and you don't have to try to figure out how to Google things anymore. Because I remember being in IT, it was always an idea of, okay, I have this problem, and I don't care who it is. I know in the IT realm, 90% of the issues are Googleable.
Yeah.
You just have to figure out how to Google them. So I'm always like, I had just been trained on how to efficiently Google certain things, but now I can use natural language. Like, hey, I have this problem with this whatever. Tell me how I can fix it, and it will pull out a lot of information that I probably would have spent hours Googling. So you bring up an interesting point as to, okay, if Google search is going to the wayside on how to find out basically anything searchable, well, then how do I make sure that my advertising dollars and stuff like Google paid ads and that sort of thing are actually still relevant? And how do I make sure that if I am trying to invest in advertising, that I can also make sure that AI is picking up on that as well? And that's always the issue, is we don't, and maybe it's my lack of knowledge, and maybe there's probably some people out there that absolutely know how this works. But it just seems to be such a mystical thing, and we don't really know exactly how AI and ChatGPT will pick a business. Like, let's say you type in, hey, I want the best accounting firm, or I want an accounting firm that has these values, and it will just randomly pick a few like top 3 people in Edmonton that do accounting. And so the problem is, we don't know if it's pulling based on Google reviews. We don't know if it's based on if it's looking at their websites. We don't know a lot of this, or at least I don't. And there might be marketing companies out there that have figured it out now, but I know at least as of a year ago, we didn't really understand exactly how it was pulling. And it's not always pulling the right information as well. It's just pulling whatever it can find and hoping that that's what you're looking for. And again, talking back and relating that back to your business plan, is that if it is pulling from your website and you don't have a lot of that information on your website, like your mission, vision, values, why you do what you do, who your ideal clients are, and like unique value propositions and stuff on your website, it might not even think about pulling your website or pulling your business at all. So, right? So it's definitely something that a marketing company would likely have under wraps by now, I'm sure. So having maybe a discussion with somebody that's in the marketing realm would be a great idea on how that works. And I want to kind of interweave that into being able to leverage AI from a sales perspective, where it kind of kills that uniqueness that I was talking about, where it's with sales, and I know we could go on forever with this, is with sales, you definitely want to try and be unique in your market space, right? Where you want to stand out from your competitors and make sure that you're staying on top of things and being different, right? Corey, for example, like if I were to look at your business, you're very different from most accountants that I know. A, because you have a great Lego collection, and B, because you do this podcast, right? How many accountants do you know that are doing this podcast or bringing awareness to different areas of business through a podcast or video or anything, right? Most accountants are way back on the wayside, like, I'll wait for the customers to come to me and we'll see how that goes, right? So you have that uniqueness because you're building an audience on being able to understand different aspects of business outside of accounting by bringing on guest speakers and that sort of thing. And then you also have the uniqueness of putting your personality into your business, like your love of building Lego models and having that into your business and having that incorporated into your culture of being happy and fun and everything like that is much more unique than oh, well, yeah, I'm a CPA out of whatever firm, right? That's not how you present yourself, and that's not how you present your business. But the problem with AI right now is you could type into ChatGPT, say, build my business plan around these attributes, but you take that to the bank, and sure, the bank might give you a loan, and that, relating back to our topic earlier, that's just the bare minimum. Like, you haven't actually taken the time to think about, is this actually resonating with me or is it not? So then you get that generic thing, and it's like, okay, well, I can apply this to a business, sure, but then that disconnect with your staff and your clients are going to be huge.
Well, and you're not going to really be passionate about it because it's not really your ideas, or it's not really your way you think.
Yeah, exactly. And same things when it goes to sales strategy. You could type in, give me a sales strategy for this ideal client profile, or you could basically write your entire business in ChatGPT and be like, hey, I'm this industry. What's my ideal client profile? It'll give you a list of an ideal client profile and why and all of that. But then you might pick, okay, these are my 3. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to do business with them. It's just because the system told you that you should, and you don't find any joy in it, and you don't find that it's being successful because you haven't actually gone and done the research yourself to be like, yeah, I want to deal with people that are willing to learn and willing to grow, right? Like, you know exactly what it is that you want. You want people that are willing to learn and willing to grow. But if you would have put that into ChatGPT and said, give me my ideal client profile for an accountant in Edmonton, it probably would have give you a whole list of different clients that probably wouldn't resonate with you. And then you're stuck doing the things that you don't like to do, like the minutia, like the spreadsheets, the tax forms, all of that stuff that doesn't make you get up in the morning. So yeah, you could build your business off ChatGPT, but that uniqueness isn't there. That personalization isn't there. And same thing with salespeople and sales teams is you might want them to increase their sales. So for example, they might go to ChatGPT and be like, okay, give me some ideas on how I can generate additional revenue, right? And so they'll go on there and ChatGPT will say, oh, we'll do some cold calls. Okay, so they try cold calls. It sucks, right? They don't get any, they just, all they do is get hangups after hangups after hangups. Or maybe they say, give me a cold call script that's going to work, right? But then they go through line by what this ChatGPT says, and they don't actually generate any interest because it's just so robotic sounding. So that uniqueness is gone. And so when a business owner wants to figure out how to be unique and everything like that, they got to tap back into all those personalization and what brings their company joy and fun and everything like that, and figuring out, okay, how can I take those initiatives and not just do what ChatGPT is telling me to do, but like apply that out in the field, right? So I'll give you a quick example here. In a great sales trainer by the name of Dale Dupree, he does something called the Sales Rebellion. And his whole model is he used to do copier sales. And he used to go door to door, cold calls, everything like that. None of it worked. And one day he had this idea of, it wasn't even really an idea. It was just, he was writing a letter, like snail mail letter, to one of his target clients. And he wrote it out, reread it, and said, hey, you know what, this sucks. Like, I'm not going to send this to him. Like, what am I doing? So he crumpled it up, threw it in the trash can, and decided, okay, I'm going to create this new letter. Let's go and send that. So he writes the new letter, but then he also has this idea of, well, maybe I'll just keep that crumpled letter as well. And then I believe the more he got thinking about it, he decided, I'm going to mail this letter, or I'm going to go deliver this letter to this person, even though it's all crumpled up and it, it doesn't look great or anything like that. And then he went and delivered that crumpled letter to that decision maker that he was trying to target. And he realized, he got to reception. Reception was like, why is this letter crumpled? Like, who are you? What are you doing? So they opened it up and they're like, what is happening? Right. And then they got so intrigued. They were like, hey, like, so-and-so, come down here. We need to, like, you got to come meet this guy. Like, he's trying to deliver you a crumpled letter. And so the guy comes down. It's like a good laugh. He's like, what is happening? So then he built his kind of sales, I'm going to say sales empire and sales training around being that unique. So he teaches people like there's so many different things that you can do to turn a cold call into a warm call and make it less about the traditional sales techniques and everything that ChatGPT is likely going to tell you to do. And so he'll sometimes go and deliver an empty box of donuts, or he has this whole following that just post all the time of all these unique things. Like one person had sent a prepaid cell phone in a box with a tracking number and everything, and tried to deliver it to like the CEO of a large company. And so he understood that once that tracking number says delivered, he's going to call that cell phone and see who answers it to try and gain some attraction there, so that they don't just become the run-of-the-mill salesperson. It becomes more of this unique experience, and it usually leads to, sure, you're going to get a no every once in a while, but you're going to likely get the person that you're trying to reach, and you're going to have a good conversation with them because that's a unique way of doing things. So there's so many things that ChatGPT and AI doesn't fully understand when it comes to like a sales process and selling and everything like that. Because you can do the generic cold calls, you can do the generic scripts that it generates for you, and you can build your business plan on the generic thing that it prints out for you. But it doesn't relate back to you. It doesn't relate back to your company. It doesn't relate back to any of the uniqueness.
So I don't think that you're inviting people or encouraging people not to use AI. So what's that co-working environment look like? How do you utilize AI to help but not be solely reliant on it? Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what it is. Like, you got to be specific. Like, if you give it a generic, I need some ideas for this, it's going to give you, like, give me ideas on how to increase my sales. It's going to give you very generic things that people have done in the past to try and increase sales. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Most times it doesn't. But if you use a little bit more specific prompting to it, so say, hey, I'm in West Edmonton, I'm an accountant, I love Lego models, I want to deal with people that are growing and learning. What are some unique ways that I can go and talk with my clients or do like sales discovery calls and that sort of thing? And maybe it'll give you a list of 3 or 4 unique things. Like maybe Corey, I'll use you as an example. Maybe it will say, okay, if you love Lego models and you want to be unique and you know that this would maybe resonate with some of your clients that you've dealt with in the past, then maybe you send them a Lego figurine with their face on it or something like that. Something unique and at low cost, right? Because you don't want to have to spend thousands of dollars to do something. But I'm sure there's probably places out there that will have, you could print a little Lego head with somebody's face on it.
Yeah, I think the Lego store has a minifigure factory that you can use to kind of do that very thing.
Yeah, so being unique in something like that, right? Where then if they do come to your office, they say, oh, well, Corey, yeah, he does like his Lego, and that makes sense why I got a figurine. Or maybe that's going to give some attraction as to, why did I get a Lego figurine in the mail from this accountant? Who is this accountant? And then they Google you, and then they realize, oh, like on your Google or on your website, they realize, oh, like this accountant actually is more than just somebody that's a CPA and only cares about doing my books and that sort of thing. He actually cares about my business and wants to see me grow and wants to see me, and maybe has some like this podcast, for example. Then they go to the podcast, and then that's a whole cycle, right? Where if you were to just ask GPT that generic prompt, what can I do to increase sales? Well, then it's going to give you that generic script or that generic printout of what you should do.
So just to recap then, the more details, context, and specifics you can give AI, the more likely the results are going to be something that's going to be more personalized to you. Mm-hmm. But then also maybe just using AI as a springboard, not as a end result.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always use it as a springboard. I mean, the thing that I use AI mostly for is when I'm typing an email, sometimes my thoughts, like I don't want to have to think nowadays when it comes to generating out an email, unless it's something that I know is going to resonate well with somebody. But like if it's somebody new and I don't necessarily understand what their personality is like, I want to obviously come across as professional and fun and easygoing and all that. So when I write my emails, I'll usually just use very plain language, and then I ask GPT to be like, hey, based on my personality, because it will get to know you, especially if you have like a paid plan. All of the chats get saved, and they essentially build a persona around you and understand who you are. So for me now, I can go in there and be like, hey, based on all the conversations that we've had, and you understand my personality, you understand the businesses that I'm in, how would you write this email if I want it to be warm and fun and inviting? And then it will usually give me some examples as to what I might be able to copy paste rather than having to spend hours. Because sometimes I have spent hours typing up an email that looks very polished and very professional and very friendly and very easygoing. But then I can also have ChatGPT do that in like 2 seconds. So, I mean, you obviously want to be a little bit weary of AI writing, and you want to fact check and anything else that it's doing for you. And maybe taking that as an example, like that springboard idea, and just using some of that information as to what you should have in your email so it doesn't look as generated. So I'd say use it as a springboard, and you can also use it for like productivity and that sort of thing. So if it's, hey, you don't want to spend half an hour crafting an email, maybe you type in the key elements of the email into GPT, and then it gives you that idea of, okay, yeah, I actually, if I would have taken the time to think about that, that's probably what I would have said, and plugging that into your email.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I think that's helpful for a lot of people. As we wrap up here today, is could you, if you had 2 minutes to kind of summarize or like say to the people listening, if you didn't get anything else out of this hour and a half we've had together today, please take this as a key takeaway, what would you say?
I would say definitely look at your business plan. If you haven't looked at it in a long time, make sure you have those elements in place: the mission, vision, values. What culture are you trying to exhibit to not only your employees but your clients as well? Figure out what data you are already capturing and what data you might want to capture, and just start capturing it. Like I say, you don't have to go and spend thousands and thousands of dollars on these different systems that will do the same thing that you could manually do in Excel or Google Sheets. Just start capturing some of that data if you haven't already got it, because that's going to give you some information, and that's going to give you a lot of data to parse through. But then you're going to be able to see where a lot of this money that you're spending on advertising and dollars, and like maybe it's sales initiatives that you try to take off the ground and you had no idea if it was actually performing well or not. Just putting those dollars into things that are actually working are going to generate you more income than it's going to if you just keep hammering out all this additional funds to things that aren't working. So taking that, redistributing those dollars into things that are actually working for you, but making sure you have that data so that you have a reference board so you can say, this is what is working, so I'm going to put my money here. And then again, if you have a sales team, start capturing that data about the sales team so that you don't necessarily have to have high turnover, and you can catch before people burn out, so you're not going through a bunch of staff and having to retrain them and everything like that, because the numbers probably aren't going to lie. And if, you know, like I say, going back to that example with Joe, maybe he had a loss in the family and he didn't know how to bring it up to you, but his numbers are very poor over the last few months. And you as the business owner are like, oh my God, what's going on with Joe? Maybe he's looking at something else. Maybe he's not feeling it. And you can have that check in and say, hey, Joe, like, what is going on? And help him get the resources that he needs in order to either pick back up sales, or maybe he needs to take a leave of absence for a little bit, or whatever it is, rather than just saying, oh, I don't know why my sales aren't performing. Let's just get rid of the person that's, you know, not calling in sick all the time, or not having that company culture that we want to express, right? So just anything like that is going to be beneficial in understanding what's going on with your sales process and your sales.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, I don't know, can't speak for everyone else, but I know that I've learned a lot and had some cool little perspective changes and ideas that have come. So I can imagine it's been quite a useful time for everyone. So thanks again for joining us today. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can get a hold of me through my website, sidecrowd.ca. I have booking links on there. I'm always happy to do a free coffee consultation just to see where people are at. And usually I have great nuggets of information that people can take away from our conversations through coffee. I'm also, you can reach me. I'd say the website's probably going to be the best because it's also got my contact information on there, my cell phone. I'm good with texting. I'm good with email. You can give me a call. I'll answer for sure because like we had talked about it's worse when you try to call somebody and they don't get back to you. So website's going to be great. So sidecrowd.ca, just all one word, sidecrowd.ca. And I'd be happy to have any conversations that people might be looking for.
Awesome. I want to thank Damin Massicotte for joining us today on the podcast. This is another episode of the Business Speak podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
You've been listening to the Business Speak podcast featuring Mr. Chill. Be sure to subscribe and add us to your podcast library to ensure you never miss an episode. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have a topic or question you'd like us to discuss, would like to be a guest on our show, or would otherwise like to get in touch with us, please visit our website at businessspeak.ca. Thanks for listening to Business Speak, the language of business simplified.